Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman, and it is time to bring the orange, and it would not be a new year 2026 if I did not welcome my good friend and fan of the program, who now has his own program, Mr. Sean Rosemarin. Welcome back into the studio.
Yeah, the guest becomes the host, becomes the guest, becomes the host.
You did it to me as well, and I will tell you, it's a really funky feeling being on the other side when your brain starts to hurt coming up with responses. So I when I only host most of the time, I now have mad respect for the person on the other side of the chair.
As do I. Well, yes, we're in 2026.
So we are.
Welcome, everybody.
And that means we're doing our predictions episode. I think this is third, fourth year now, and I love it because you go and take all your thoughts and you do a look back on the prior year's predictions and are pretty honest with yourself about how well you saw the things that might happen and give an assessment, and then you give your prediction for 2026. So we're going to hit all those things, and I'm super excited. Quick blatant plug: you're now doing a podcast of your own beyond the IT headlines. When folks go to YouTube, you can find both programs. You are now running for 4 months, 5 months. How's it going?
Yeah,
going all right?
Almost 13, 14 episodes in. Ultimately what we're trying to do and seem to be succeeding at is helping people to kind of unpack. There's just so much noise out there in the media. Unfortunately, some of the social platforms have essentially become the cereal box of this generation. It's a little bit like advertisements that just go in really, really fast succession.
Mm-hmm.
But in a lot of customer conversations, people are just like, give me the straight dope.
Yeah, cut through it. Tell
me what's really happening. And so we pick a particular topic. We pick a particular news item. And we give really pointed views of maybe this is right, maybe this isn't right, what should you be thinking about? And we bring in both internal and external experts to help us unpack it. So, the show momentum's been great. We've got over 15,000 views. Show to date, your episode did incredibly well. It must be your incredible followership.
Well, joint collaboration always sort of works at these things. But what I like about it that's complementary to this program, and we have an audience base for a while, though, is I'm pretty open. We're going to provide a pure perspective. We may not do it right away because the flow of the program is always, who are you? Okay, what things are hard that we're going to talk about and why are they hard and how do you solve them? And then there's a little bit, how can we help? What can we do better? I love yours because it's just, we're not going to give you a whole pure message and story here. Maybe there'll be topics related to things we do. But it is really just cutting to the chase of, okay, we're going to talk for 40 minutes about AI chatbots and what that means for any type of business that may be considering them and what they should do.
Yeah, what's an AI agent?
Yeah.
Right? What's Sora 2 going to do to the enterprise? But we don't talk products, we don't talk pure platform, we don't talk pure portfolio. We really just try to talk about like what should you be thinking about and what seems to be real and maybe what's a little squishy.
Yeah. Which I think is what we're going to do here today. Look at that wonderful segue that I did. I have to check about snow and bears whenever you come on, because you're from Vancouver, and we have that fun bear story from years ago. Is there snow? Has there been skiing? Which I know.
So December was an incredible month for skiing.
Yeah.
January's been pretty dry. I know it's been dry in parts of the U.S.
Yeah.
It's been a little dry up in Whistler where I ski. But I don't know, this week, fingers crossed, looks like there's some snow flying and still lots of ski season left. So my hopes are we'll get back to what we want, which is deep, unfettered champagne powder. And bears, well, they're sleeping right now.
That's true.
But you'll be happy to know, just a little factoid, less bears killed in my area over the last 12 months.
This is good.
Than historically, which means bears are staying out of the garbage. People are taking care of keeping their garbage well put together because a fed bear is a dead bear. And we'd like to keep them around and enjoy them for years to come.
Yeah, love having the bears. All right. Well, there's your hot 2026 bear update, everyone, as well as the weather report.
I feel like we're going to have some football fans all upset at us talking about bears.
Well, yeah, the Bears did sort of crash at the day we're recording this at a week or so ago, and we're now on to the Super Bowl. And my son, who somehow I failed as a parent and made into a Seahawks fan, despite growing up in the Bay Area, is absolutely thrilled. Yeah, he's over the moon. He was very nervous on Sunday night, though.
Well, I ran by the stadium today. It's looking good.
Looks good. It looks good. They'll have it together here in here in Santa Clara, we are, for folks that don't know, if you're not from around the area, Super Bowl Stadium is about 1.5 miles that way, kind of down over there. So it's going to be fun to see all the noise and the activity. Why predictions? Why did you initially set out to do that a few years ago? Was it just things that were rattling around in your brain and you just needed a place to get it out and share? Like, what was that? Why'd you start doing this and are still doing it now?
Well, I mean, here's the interesting thing about predictions. They're a little bit like opinions, right? Everybody's got one.
Mm-hmm.
But by thinking about predictions, you force yourself down the path of not only taking a larger lens, what's going to happen, what could happen, but you also reshape your thinking about, what did I say would happen last year? And did it actually happen? And so I've always been a fan of predictions or predictors that held themselves accountable to the predictions they made. And so I committed, if I was going to do this, I was going to hold myself accountable to the big bets.
Okay.
And frankly, I think the last year has shown us nothing, if nothing. It has shown us that we are moving at a absolute speed of light pace.
Yeah.
The innovations happening today are stuff that a decade ago we would have thought would take decades, and they're happening in years. So, frankly, I think it allows all of us to take a bit of a bigger lens, assess whether or not any of this really matters or it's just noise, and then make more informed decisions. So, I started a few years ago, and I've really enjoyed it. It's part of my, Christmas download. You're in the holidays, you're not working on day-to-day stuff, right? Maybe just came off the ski hill, thinking positively about the year ahead, and I'm really enjoying it.
It's also good think time, right? And, I'm in a period of time right now here at Pure where I'm working on 2 global events at once and the planning that goes with that, along with other things and maintaining the show. And I've felt over the last week and a half, I haven't had that just sit down and think time, right? That 3M mandated, you will sit for an hour and come up with ideas. And so it sounds like a really good time where you just get to, decouple from the day-to-day, but also I love that it makes you put a stake in the ground, right? You can't be wishy-washy. You can't, nobody wants to read predictions where it's like, well, it might be this or it might be that. Like, you actually come out and go, here's what I think, and this is why I think it. And that's what we're gonna drive into.
Yeah, I started to use my plane flying time to do the same. So the people next to me are playing Candy Crush for 8 hours, 9 hours at a go, which is remarkable in and of itself. But thinking time is something we've all lost with smartphones, and I'm trying to make it, even get into the car. Don't turn on the radio.
Yeah.
Don't turn on anything.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised what kind of thoughts come into your mind.
Yeah. I also took I don't like New Year's resolutions. I don't like using that word. I decided this year to read more. And I've been finding that pleasurable and enjoyable as well. And that it started more halfway through last year because I just looked at all the classic books that I hadn't read. I have friends that are English majors and English professors, and I said, send me a list of books.
Did you get through the Odyssey? I think that was last year. Oh, you did?
Nope.
Okay.
I got a couple hundred pages in and I crashed and I put it away, and I couldn't get through. I couldn't get really much further past that chapter. You remembered. I couldn't get much past that chapter where it basically gives the roster of every single fighting force, fighting family. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. But I had gone to Gettysburg last summer as part of a wedding, and I picked up a 900-page Stephen Sears tome on Gettysburg from all the factual accounts. And I finished that a month or 2 ago.
Wow.
And then I just jumped into Project Hail Mary because that movie's coming out in a little bit. I just finished that last night. That was, oh man, what a great read that is.
I'm going to pick that up. I've just recently restarted Lord of the Rings. So starting with The Hobbit.
Amazing.
Going all the way through. I read it when I was probably 13 or 14, and I'm going to go back and read it again with new eyes, some gray hair, see how I feel about it. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. That might inspire me as well. Speaking of looking back, let us look at what you got right and just glance through. I want to spend a lot of time on the new predictions, but I pulled out a few, right? So the ones where you felt you're really on target, and I'll go through all 3 of them. AI becomes our on-demand strategist. And this is one that you've had a common thread on for a couple of years. Like we've talked about this, right? Where it's a partnership. It's cooperative. Multi-cloud 2.0 forces a unified data platform related to some of the things we talked about as a company in the fall. And then security ramps up end to end and quantum planning begins, but also that security becomes sort of everybody's job as part of that. What'd you get right on this? What is going on?
Well, look, AI is human plus machine.
Yeah.
And one of the things it does really well is summarization,
Mhm.
right? I think it was one of my guests on Beyond the IT Headlines who said, AI is great at non-deterministic problems.
Yeah.
Give me a perspective. Give me a summary. Help me understand this. Not so good at deterministic. That's where we use databases, right? Typical queries. But the reality is we now have better access to information. We went from search engines to answer engines. Those answer engines are actually more effective at helping us to get the information we need in the development of our strategy. They don't develop it for us, but they help us understand. Multi-cloud's a big one, right? It's pretty clear now that it's not going to be Google or Azure or AWS. It's going to be all of them. And by the way, Oracle's in there.
Sure.
And by the way, Alibaba's in there. And there's a whole bunch of other players. But the concept of the seamless data plane is becoming more and more prevalent. How do I keep my data services and my data state the same, regardless of where it actually lives? Because it's going to live close to the application, because data gravity is a thing, and physics matters. Thirdly, security. This is still what I believe to be the biggest issue that we're all struggling with.
Okay.
I would tell you that it's gotten a little less airplay because AI is kind of the hottest thing in town. That's what the boards are talking about. And before that, they talked about security. The problem is AI makes security much, much harder.
Yeah.
And then AI plus quantum actually completely changes the paradigm for security. And, I think it was one of my guests last week who said, ultimately, humans are still the biggest attack vector in security. And it's getting to the point now where our 100,000-year-old brains that have evolved, albeit we live 100 years, so we don't evolve as quickly as houseflies. We are now the biggest potential issue when it comes to security. And our brains are no longer going to be good enough to tell us what to click on and what's not to click on and what's real and what's not. So I still think this becomes the biggest issue over the next decade to keep secure assets secure. And when we start to talk about, how does AI agents play into that? What data sets do agents have access to? Do they know who can request answers from those agents? And then I put in quantum and quantum encryption or decryption really through quantum computing. And that becomes an even bigger issue. So we did get that right. I mean, AI, multi-cloud, security, those were, outside of VMware, probably the hottest topics of 2025.
Yeah, and will continue to be, no doubt. I was kind to you on the next part because I always like to look at, and you're not critical, you're self-evaluating in a fair way.
I mark myself hard.
You mark yourself hard. And I said a little off or didn't happen yet. And what jumped out here, and I remember we were talking about this last year, was around operating model transformation. You were really big on the game that all these changes, many things you just talked about, right? AI and multi-cloud and security, they were going to drive really significant changes or shifts in the way companies operate or the way that they organize. I didn't quite get there, right?
Yeah, because, I think we're always looking for the magic pill.
Okay.
Or the magic injection or the magic technology tool that we don't have to change anything. We don't have to change the way we live. We don't have to drink less. We don't have to eat healthier. We don't have to get exercise. We can just do one thing and, everything will take care of itself. And I think that was the initial promise of AI was just do things the way you always did them, but use this tool.
Yeah.
Or buy this platform.
Just slap this on. Yeah.
The problem is the same people, process, and technology triangle that we've been talking about for decades didn't change when it came to AI. And the hard part is actually, if a human's going to work with a machine, how is human work and human processes going to change? And are you willing to actually make those changes within your organization? I don't feel like we really kind of unpacked that and got to it. And we'll talk a little bit about it today as we get into this year. But I think a lot of organizations said, my data's not organized the way it needs to be. The amount of touches that this workflow goes through as it goes from a data source to a data lake to a query engine to an inference engine is not optimal. How does AI fit in? And the problem is if you try to make it fit what you have, right, lift and shift, you kind of break the beauty of what it is. You break the efficiency. So I feel as though this is the year we're going to get there, but last year it felt like everybody was trying to build the killer app.
Yeah.
And this isn't a killer app. This is an evolution in the way in which we build systems and we work with machines, and that's going to require people, process, and technology.
Is it only AI? Because I could think about what we were just talking about a moment ago relative to security and cyber as well, and that we know in talking to different customers that we work with that it's it's the blind person and the elephant problem. You ask 4 different groups in the company, what does security mean? And the web team is going to go, oh, well, we got that covered, and email's going to do this, and then backend IT's got theirs, and CISO's doing some other things. So does security, or is that a byproduct of that operating model transformation challenge? Or is it just that AI now is shined a deeper light on it so that now you can take on the security changes that are needed to get everybody working the same way?
Yeah, it's an era thing.
Yeah.
Right. So what I would tell you is, if you're buying a product, if you're looking at a product, a television, a radio, no problem. Take your old radio, take your old TV, put your new TV in, everything's great. You now have OLED instead of whatever you had before, LCD. But when you think about things like e-commerce, you think about things like cloud, you think about things like AI, these aren't products. These are strategies.
Yeah.
These are new ways of working. And new ways of working require business transformation. But the reality is, Rob, business transformation is really hard.
It's hard.
And it takes a long time.
Yep.
And so it's perfectly normal to think, well, I'll just bring this thing in and we'll figure it out. But the smart companies are actually stepping back and saying, hold on, what kind of business transformation is it going to require?
Mm-hmm.
Are we ready for that? And maybe, should we be pumping the brakes on the build out of some of this to make sure that we can actually bring our organization along? Because ultimately, if I buy it ahead of when I need it, and then it takes me a year and a half to adopt it, I may have overpaid, I may have overscaled, and I may now be obsolete before I've even gone live.
Sounds like a time during the late 90s. Sorry, I'm just thinking of
Now you're aging yourself.
all the servers that we sold to companies when I was at another company. And a lot of those companies aren't around anymore. They were overbuying, right? All the servers, because things were taken off in the .com. But that was another era. I'll have to take the magic pill to go back to that. I was looking at your blog, and I loved to set up the predictions that you had. There was a quote in the blog, William Gibson. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, which I think is akin to what you're talking about, is this exciting set of innovations is here, and people have tried to just go throw it in and layer it on things without taking into account the strategy or the organization. But there's more to that.
Well,
Distribution.
Here's what I would tell you is,
Yeah.
we have that typical kind of, what do we call it? That sort of map of grief. It's the grief cycle,
Yeah.
right? We start with denial,
Mhm.
then we go to anger, and then eventually we get to acceptance. But the sooner you get to acceptance, the sooner you move through this curve.
Mhm.
And I think we felt this in AI. Denial, it's not real.
Yeah.
Can't possibly do what we think it's going to do. Angry, it's going to take all our jobs. It's going to cause, all sorts of carnage. But what we're starting to see is actually those that have accepted what this can do, and there are limitations.
Mhm.
We are early in this journey. We're in spring training.
Yeah.
We're not even in the first inning,
Yeah.
to use a baseball analogy. But those that are starting to use it and integrate it into their lives have an unfair advantage over everybody else. I would kind of equate to you, Rob, that when the calculator first came out,
Mhm.
there were people that said, don't use that. It's cheating. It's wrong. You should know all this off the top of your head. But if you look at where we've gone with calculators, slide rules, spreadsheets, you can't actually get your job done now without using a spreadsheet tool in many cases. We're going to get to the same journey, but right now we're in this squishy area of 3 to 5 years where those that figure out how to do this, and it is hard and it requires transformation, are actually going to have jet fuel to power their growth before it is integrated and built into every application we use, every consumable we take advantage of, and every process we look at.
Did you ever have an HP 12C calculator?
Yes.
And I remember learning in school the equations that you would do. They taught us.
It was backwards
At the time.
or the age.
No, yeah, the RPN, right? But I remember learning the math of how to do it and how long it took the math to get through those equations. And then they hand you this device where you're calculating some type of interest rate over a certain period of time and how much it's changing. And when the second you're tapping it in and the answer is at your fingertips, whereas I probably would have, done math on all sides of these paper to get to it. It's incredible. And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm giving an analogy. Those using AI today essentially have built up a slate of interns.
Yeah.
Okay. Highly motivated, highly capable, highly intelligent, but not that contextually aware.
Yeah.
Just like interns, not a lot of experience, not a lot of real world.
You have to know the limitations.
But if you have 15 of these interns working with you, under your guidance, under your tutelage, and I don't.
Yeah.
That's going to make a significant impact in what you can do in a day versus what I can. And that eventually becomes the new paradigm of what's expected.
Yeah.
And so, the advice is start to take advantage of what is available, being conscious that there are still a lot of things for us to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, to William Gibson's point, the productivity gain is today not evenly distributed.
Yeah.
And those of you listening should say, how do I take advantage of it? How do I get the secret power before it becomes the status quo and is expected of everyone?
Well, and for those who don't adopt quickly or at all, the gap starts to get larger over time.
Well, last time I checked, what'd they say? Amazon was just a bookstore?
Yeah. A little while ago.
Yeah, e-commerce was just a fad. No one was going to put their credit card in online. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we'll start to know that we're getting to mainstream around a lot of this, specifically to AI, when we stop talking about AI.
Yeah, for sure.
We knew VMware was a thing when we stopped talking about virtualization. We knew Kubernetes was a thing when we stopped talking about Kubernetes, at least all the time. We'll know that we're getting to mainstream AI when we stop talking about everything being AI. It just is. It's integrated. It's built in.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't think about where your Wi-Fi or your internet is coming from anymore, whereas we used to.
Yeah, no one else. Oh, is that on the internet?
Yeah. Is that on the internet? Was that .com?
You don't exist if you're not.
Or to go way back in time, electricity, but we'll eliminate the history lessons on there. All right. I led with that quote. Let's just jump in. I feel like I should have some kind of drum to do a drum roll here, but we'll not. We've got 9 of these that we're going to hit. So we're going to go through kind of, somewhat quickish fashion, but I want to get enough context on each one with you to see where your head is at. And we'll start number 1. We already talked copilots, right? So copilots being a personal assistant, now you're talking about them becoming a mature process owner, right? In your prediction. We stop deploying AI assistants and we start agentizing process, which speaks to me a little bit more around automation, a little bit more about understanding what they do and just letting it go happen as opposed to lots of active engagement.
Yeah, I mean, copilots are cute, right? I like to equate them back to Clippy, although it wasn't incredibly successful. But Clippy was
living in the 90s on this episode, Sean. I love it.
Clippy was the first copilot.
Yeah, it was.
Ahead of its time, right? But how can I help you? Are you trying to write a letter?
Yeah.
Right? And even now, if you go into things like Google, it says beautify this slide. Well, that's a copilot.
Yeah.
By the way, some work to do in that particular feature.
I have not.
Interesting.
I have not had the courage to push it yet.
Interesting. Definitely worth trying.
Okay.
But please don't submit without checking the work.
Okay. Good to know.
But copilots are kind of an early iteration of where we're at. What we're building now are agents that actually say, don't just sit on the side and kind of shout at me at things I should be thinking about. That's not incredibly helpful. Actually, I want to take a process end to end, and I want to decide there's certain things that AI is going to do and certain things that I'm going to do. And the human in the middle is going to manage and monitor those agents as they go through that process. So you can imagine, back to my earlier analogy of interns, I have a project, I have something I'm trying to do. I'm going to break it into the steps that need to be done: research, summarization, build out, initial draft, publish, amplify. And I'm going to decide which of those particular pieces of the task I'm going to give to the agent. And when the agent's done, it's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, you asked me to do this. Maybe it took me 5 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, maybe a day. I'm done.
Yeah.
Now you can go in and do what you need to do and then send it off to the next agent. Eventually, we'll automate a lot of this. Agents will take more and more of this, and humans will focus on where we're better at and what we're better at completing. But this concept of there's an agent for that, this is going to be very big. I would pose it to you that today everybody's off building their own agents. We're not far away from having an app store for agents or an agent store, if you want that. where you'll be able to go in and actually find agents that are specifically good at certain things, and you'll buy them just like you do apps, or you'll pay for them every time you invoke them. But this will be the agent revolution, the year of the build out from copilots, cute sort of accessories, to agents that can actually complete full functions.
Yeah. Going end to end, as opposed to where I feel like when I use agents now, or when I use Copilot now, it's just one thing, right? And then there's a pause and I've got to figure it out and then what the next is. Whereas here you can set it up. And we demoed something similar to this, right? And Accelerate in the fall.
Well, think about even what we have in Pure One Copilot. It's one thing to tell me that there's something that I should resolve or there's something that I should optimize, but the agent actually says, hey, would you like me to go do it?
Yeah. And then I'm going to tell you when I've done it and let you go check out the way it was done.
That's right. Or I'm going to tell you what I did. Right. Or before I do it, depending on how you've programmed it, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So that you can determine whether or not you are prepared for me to go do that.
Oh, wait. Well, don't do it that way. Do it this way, but then set it off.
So you think about this concept of human plus machine.
Mm-hmm.
The human's the foreman. The factory is full of agents. The agents are off doing things that you've asked them to do. Your job as a human actually becomes more exciting now. You can get that much more done, but you're watching as a foreman, you're watching everything happening in the factory. And when a machine stops, an agent's finished, you've got to go in and invoke the action that's required until you've built enough trust to say, actually, don't check with me anymore.
Yeah.
You're good enough at this. Just go nuts.
And that's the real key, right? Is getting to that point. But it takes this maturity that you're talking about going from just copilots to
agents.
Fully formed
but I think we get there this year.
We get there this year.
And then agents become more complex. Agents become more autonomous. Now we're going into 27, 28, 29. But you can see how this rolls out.
Okay. Number 2, we're back a little bit in the security, but maybe compliance area. Verification becomes the new frontier. Time to trust replaces time to answer. This is talking about enterprises building verification stacks to keep AI honest. It sounds a little related to what we just touched on, a little bit of that with that trust of things, but now you're talking about actual enterprises making others feel good and verifying what you're doing with the AI, whether it's agents or other things.
Well, it's very interesting because the initial race here was to train.
Sure.
Right? How quickly could I train the public corpus? So, you had Anthropic, you had OpenAI, you had Microsoft, you had Meta, all building models to train the general corpus. Then we got to inference. Can I build chatbots? Can I build LLMs? Then the race was how quickly can I have the LLMs answer the question? And it was like, oh, mine can do it in 10 seconds and yours can do it in 5 seconds. Okay, guys, let's just set it right. Nobody cares if it's 5 or 10 seconds. At this point, we're all okay with 10 seconds for somebody to respond to a query. Maybe next year it won't be okay, but today it's okay. What's become a bigger piece is the answer correct?
Yeah.
So if mine takes 5 seconds and yours takes 10, but mine is 5 times more accurate, who's not going to wait 5 seconds for 10 times more accurate? And when it comes to enterprises, if you think about a use case like customer service agents who are using an LLM to better service customers, right? CSR is still talking to the customer, but they're using the chatbot to get the answer. You want them to be right. Because there's nothing more frustrating, Rob, than hanging up the phone to someone who says, I've resolved your issue. And now it's not resolved.
Yep.
Now I got to call back in. I got to wait 17 minutes, blah, blah, blah. So this time to truth is really, really important. I no longer care about how quickly time to first token. There is a benchmark I have to hit. But what's my time to truth?
Yeah.
And if I take the inference down just the latency up just a little bit, because I'm still a human, how much latency am I willing to deal with in order to get a better answer? And I think those are the questions we start asking this year. It's less about how fast. It's more about how accurate.
And it's interesting because we're putting it in the hands of the machine. And as a couple of people that grew up using all the various search engines that we got, we use search engines, but we accepted inaccuracy, right? Because it was just giving you a best approximation of, okay, here's the thing that I'm searching for and returning a list. And then we do the work.
Yeah, you eyeballed it.
I'm eyeballing all the search results and going, that wasn't right. Okay, I'm going to try a different term. I still didn't get it, but there's a bunch of weird stuff. And now you're saying, now we're putting it into the hands more of the machine and relying on the verification, relying on the accuracy.
That's right. And time to truth is really important because every mistake costs you money.
Right.
It costs you customer satisfaction. It costs you buy-in from those who you've asked to use the agent. So it's not that people are willing to wait forever.
Sure.
But it's that if it's a difference of 3 seconds or 4 seconds, for double the accuracy, a human will wait 4 seconds for the answer.
Yeah.
Now, when machines are doing agentic actions for other machines, potentially self-driving, autonomous driving, etc., I may not have that latency window. But even then, a millisecond versus 2 milliseconds.
I'd rather have it right if I'm driving.
These are the decisions, but the point is, this is another vector. It's no longer just about speed.
Yeah.
It's about truth.
Yeah. But I like how you went through that evolution, right, of the different stages of what was going on in AI to arrive now at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, number 3. One of your favorite ones. I feel like this is in every year's predictions. Energy scarcity will drive new AI economics. We do read a lot about this in the news. Prediction is in 2026, serious AI programs will manage economics like a business system.
Yeah. So look, we knew this energy thing was coming. And we've always said, oh, it's going to hold us back in our build out. Now, the good news is the models have matured significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Models today are 100 times more efficient than they were a year ago. Will they be 100 times more efficient next year? I don't know. But one would think there's still a lot of room to go in terms of model efficiency, architecture efficiency, moving stuff to the edge, etc. But the point is, how do I make sure I'm not overusing it, right? Do I really need to use a power drill to put a nail or a screw into the wall? Probably not. Do I even need a nail gun if I'm only putting a single nail in? So AI is starting to think about, maybe I don't need to invoke the highest model for this particular query. I'll give you a real example. If you just look at LLMs today, you've got Nano, you got, OpenAI ChatGPT Nano, you've got ChatGPT Regular, you've got ChatGPT Pro. There are all sorts of deviations in terms of token count and the amount of time that it spends thinking about a problem. Today, we select that as an individual. But AI can start to say, actually, I understand the question. I understand where you're looking at. I'm going to drive the most efficient response.
Start routing it.
So you'll be able to get more queries in within your energy footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And I think AI will actually help us run AI as a business by building a smarter way to get to the answer, as opposed to what we've been traditionally doing, which is just brute force. Put everything through the biggest, fattest box, and I'll waste it, but I'll get it all through.
Yeah.
We just won't be able to afford that.
It doesn't matter for everything that somebody's doing, right? It's not, you don't need the brute force method for certain queries.
Yeah. What is the minimally acceptable model to give the correct answer? And incidentally, this is a hard problem to solve.
Mm-hmm.
But when we solve it, we free up energy to deal with all sorts of other queries. So rather than being able to support a power footprint of 10,000 inferences, for example, I could support 100,000. The model is going to help us. The economics are going to help us. The architecture is going to help us. But ultimately, we also have to get smart about what we use where, so that we don't generate an incredibly verbose response to a very simple question when, honestly, the first 2 sentences were enough for that user to do what they needed to do.
Yeah, right tool for the right job comes back into play, as always. Yeah, love that.
A hammer's not elegant, but it's pretty darn good for putting one nail into the ground.
It does. Gets the job done, right? You had to get really creative with tools the other night on your hammer thing. Sorry, I'm getting a dishwasher repaired and I had to take the mounts out and one of the screws was stripped. Well, that's not great, right? So I got my Phillips in there and my regular flathead. Nope, didn't work. Good old pair of needle nose. All right, just wrapped it around and, went to town. My wife would say I'm not very skilled.
So you can put an elastic band over the head of the screw and the elastic band will give you back the
torque. Interesting. Good tip. I learned something.
So here's a potato, apparently. Yeah, like a potato on the screw.
And I didn't have a lot of room. I didn't have leverage underneath the mount, underneath the countertop, unfortunately. For a small potato, wouldn't have had enough leverage. This was great. Number 4, we're hitting data here. Data stops being an asset and evolves to a supply chain. The prediction, the best enterprises will run data like a manufacturing facility. I feel like we've been heading that direction, though, or the successful enterprises that have taken a self-realized view of their data real estate and what they need to do with it to be more successful, to drive more value.
Yeah, I'm gonna test something new to try to kind of hammer this point home.
Yeah.
So let's think about it this way. Today, we have data types. We have structured data, databases. We have semi-structured data, some metadata and data together, call that productivity files, and we have unstructured data, videos, audio files, logs, etc. If we think of all of those as basically being fuel to AI, our job is to figure out how to refine those energy sources, get them through the pipeline, and allow them to feed the next generation of applications. But the refinement, you see, is very difficult because structured data doesn't require a lot of refinement. It's already in a database. It already has tons of context. Semi-structured requires some refinement, and unstructured, which is actually growing the fastest, requires a lot of refinement. And so when you think about this concept of a manufacturing facility, how am I essentially converting and translating? We used to call it ETL, but how am I transforming all that data to uniformly fit into a pipeline that can then be fed into training systems that will then power inference?
Yeah.
Organizations have never looked at their data this way. They've taken their data in, they've stored it, they've kept it for compliance, they've made sure it's secure, but literally it's all a whole bunch of different stuff that's sitting in a whole bunch of different areas, folders, files, etc. If I actually want to train on it, I have to find a way to normalize it and distill it. And we have not had to think about that before. Even a data warehouse, it was just a data swamp. Just take it all and put it there.
Yep.
This concept of a data lake house now starts to take us in that direction, but still is just a better organized swamp.
Yeah.
How do I actually distill it so that regardless of whether I have unstructured, semi-structured, or structured data, I can essentially get everything through the pipeline and everything powering a training system regardless of where it started.
Yeah.
That is the manufacturing process that's tied to this new era of essentially, data standardization and what we've said here, right? Treating data like a manufacturing facility. So I think these are going to be big discussions. And once again, it's not one tool.
Yeah.
It's not one piece of software. It's really thinking about data as a resource, as opposed to an asset, a resource that needs to get consumed and therefore needs to get refined and needs to get standardized. And I think you'll see us talk more and more about that as we get through the year.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a mindset, but also it's not just thinking of it in terms of, well, this is an infrastructure thing, right? This just lives here. It's you've got this pool, and what are you going to do? I have had Andrew Silifant on the show a couple times in the last month and a half, and we've actually gone kind of deep down this rabbit hole as well, because he just sits and thinks about data pipelines and data as a resource, and it's a fascinating one that we talked about a lot.
Well, I'll even give you an analogy everybody can relate to. We unfortunately integrate sugar into many foods and many products around the world, but the sources of that sugar are very different.
Yeah,
it's not all sugar cane, right? We get sugar from multiple sources. But the reality is when it arrives at the facility where it's turned into something that we eat or something that we consume, it's essentially white granulated sugar.
Yeah.
But it started as something else. So that whole manufacturing process, that distillation process, that refinement process that turns it into raw white sugar that can then be consumed, or brown sugar if you prefer, is an important part of the distillation of that particular resource. So really, data's an asset for sure, but actually data's a resource. So you have to be in the resource business of being able to bring that into something that can be consumed readily by all of your applications. And that's a big piece of being a data platform and a data company.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're halfway through here. Not that I'm trying to rush us through it. I like staying on this. This is an interesting one. Relevance has a half-life, becomes a strategy, not a slogan. Prediction 2026 is when organization build relevance engines. Oh, this is back to your, okay, I didn't read all the way through on that second line, but this is your relevance engine type of prediction.
Yeah, so look, relevance has a half-life. And so the unfortunate reality, getting back to my distillation point, is it's not only whether it's true, it's whether it's true today. And whether you're starting to treat information that is more current with a higher relevance than information that might be a year or two old. It's not always going to be the case, but you could imagine where AI is headed is dashboards are no longer required. If you want to know where something is or how your sales team's doing, how your marketing campaign's doing, how your latest advertising campaign's doing, you're just going to go ask AI. But the reality is the information that has happened most recently will be more important than that happened in the past unless you explicitly are looking at history. So this concept of timescale becomes really important. In addition, imagine a world of autonomous vehicles where they're communicating with each other through what they're seeing and what they're observing. So you could imagine that how I might behave an hour ago might actually be different than how I should behave right now because the weather's changed. And the other cars have actually talked to each other and rebuilt the learning system to tell me that I should actually slow down, speed up, leave more distance, turn my wipers higher. And so this concept of half-life, what is the useful amount of time that information is still considered the gold standard? How often do I have to RAG train? How often do I have to reassert my training database? How often do I need to take in new sensors? It's going to depend on use case. But this concept of renewal of the model is going to become incredibly important.
I feel like it's early though. For how far along are we on that? It seems like a really challenging task.
It depends
how the currency of the data, the currency of
it does. But remember that as a human, it's not that important because I have context.
Yeah.
But if I start to think about, I've been referencing autonomous vehicles, but let's go into robotics. Right? There's no doubt in my mind that robotics will be one of the biggest outputs of AI. AI will actually help robots get beyond what you and I grew up with. I don't know if it's going to quite get to the Jetsons, but somewhere in between. And you can think about in a factory floor, this kind of real-time communication between robots, this real-time communication of the environment becomes essentially critical. So will we get there this year? I think robotics is going to actually move along at a pace faster than we expect it to. And I think that even autonomous driving, I was watching at CES, NVIDIA unveiled their new autonomous driving module that I think Mercedes is going to put into their cars. I think we're going to start to see a lot of this real time, but it's going to require us to really have a much quicker access to the most recent data in order to make the best decision.
Okay. All right. Thanks for letting me double click a little further on that one. Number 6. Love this one, right? Because we talk in these terms here. The platform mindset. Platform becomes a leadership mandate. And I think you've covered platform on priors. Like we kind of dug into the meaning of a platform and what that is. But you go further. 2026 will punish infrastructure complexity and reward platforms that remove friction through automation and orchestration, right? And it dovetails to some of the control plane ideas that we've talked about and capabilities that we have. But in general, take the pure part out of it. Platforms succeed. Platforms are where it happens and what people invest in.
Look, I think as we got into the early innings of where we are in this AI era, there was a lot of investment in what I'll call HPC-like technology.
Mm-hmm.
And incidentally, performance is impressive, hands down. But the problem is at scale, most organizations do not have the experience, the personnel, the time, or the money to manage these things at scale.
Yeah.
So whether the product was engineered well or not, there is a certain element of how much operational experience and time will it take me to manage it. And by the way, is it too complex that I actually stand a risk of hurting myself in the process?
Sure.
Whether it's a bug or a feature or a misconfiguration or something that should have, that went unnoticed that shouldn't have, the reality is, if you're a research facility who's staffed with PhDs in computer science, who are building and essentially, in the old world, we used to call it crimping your own cables, buying one-off pieces, that's one thing. But a platform says, you've actually taken care of a lot of that for me. I don't have to worry about it. You've put the guardrails in, you've made it easy to manage, you've made it simple to operate, and you continue to drive that simplicity more and more forward so that I don't have to staff a team to go write code fixes or engage with a level 3 engineering team to get code fixes done. Worry about applying 71 patches within 3.5 months because the product's constantly getting rewritten. And so I think this is where we're headed. I know this is where we're headed because ultimately when I look at platforms like ERP, it ultimately won out. It became SAP and PeopleSoft.
Yeah.
We looked at database platforms, right? From reporting to visualization, etc. There were one thing. It's SQL, it's Oracle.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially where we've ended up. E-commerce platforms, same thing. We're going to end up in the same place. And when it comes to infrastructure, a lot of the HPC science projects are essentially growing old, growing out of date, and essentially evolving towards impossible to manage.
Yeah.
And I know that because we're getting called firsthand to say, hey, come in and help us purify this.
Yeah.
Right? Due to our AI infrastructure, what you guys did to our database infrastructure. Make it simple. Do what you did to our file infrastructure. Make it simple. Because ultimately, we're dying. We're choking in the amount of technical debt this has brought into our organization. And we're saying, uncle, we can't do this any further.
Yeah. Yeah. Particularly not if you're going to go take on a lot of these new initiatives that we've been talking about, right? That's what holds you back.
Well, when you spend all this money on the CapEx
Yeah.
to spin up these new labs and new facilities, you don't necessarily get the same amount in OpEx. You hire 10 or 20 or 30 or 200 more people.
Yep. Yeah. It's a trade-off for sure. Media. I love this. Number 7. Synthetic media turns brand into a security domain. Prediction. Content authenticity becomes an enterprise control.
Yeah, so look, I mean, I don't spend that much time on social media.
Yeah.
But when I do these days, right, what started as cute, a shark is attacking a cheetah in the middle of the water, or I don't know, a biker gets a huge tidal wave. Those were kind of cute and Sora too.
Yeah. Initially.
But then the news hit that, a avatar impersonating a CFO had joined a Zoom call and approved a $5 million purchase order,
right,
which was essentially then cut. And only when he was asked to sign off formally did the person who was being represented in this call say, I was never in that call. I never approved it. The deep fake is real.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, our 100,000-year-old brains aren't that good at looking at. It's a little like your 4K TV and an 8K TV. I mean, we're past the point where your eyes know the difference between 4K and 8K.
Yeah.
We're now at the point where I'm not sure. Right? I mean, you and I could argue that there'll be a time in the future where something real happened and it'll just be too easy to say, oh, actually, it didn't happen. That's a deep fake. But at the end of the day, if you're a company or you're a brand and there is media out there, you have to protect that brand. That includes things like likeness, character, right? I mean, as a point of reference, I think Matthew McConaughey just a couple of weeks ago actually took out IP license on his voice.
Sure. And
his key statements. Can you use these things? We talked about this on Beyond the IT Headlines, and our CTO, Alex McMullen, had some great context around this. But this is going to be a real concern because you could essentially now run a slander campaign as a 12-year-old student in your basement that would never have been possible before the advent of where we are with media. So ultimately, how you start to secure your assets, your likeness, your brand, your trademark now goes well beyond print and well beyond, even radio and TV. It now goes into, how do I make sure these third-party video creators don't actually create negative brand perception for me? And how do I protect those assets?
Yeah. Well, a lot of us are going to have to go back, right? Because there were many of those social media tools that came out before any of this was possible. So, personally, or friends that I know are, let's take something like Facebook, right? It's a place where people have deposited hundreds, if not thousands, of photos of themselves or their children or their family members or friends, and they're all just sitting there, right? So those are things that are absolutely susceptible. I mean, when I tell family members and they ask about it, I say, just make sure you lock down your account, right? Make your account private. That's the least you can do as a starting point. The data's still there. The images are still there. Somebody can hack and get into them. But at a minimum, you will keep those from getting out into the wild where they can potentially be used as deepfakes. And then it's really going to be incumbent on enterprises to help us feel secure that something is valid and to do that trust and do that verification.
Yeah, and today there are some light controls. Sure, we'll see heavy controls, but it's really going to come down to the enforcement of some of these controls that say, you were not allowed to do that. Yeah. You did it. And now there is a massive fine or, a perp walk or whatever it happens to be. Because ultimately, you're not going to stop. Pandora's out of the box, right? These images and these video clips like this one will be on YouTube are already out there. The question is, what is the penalty for not abiding to acceptable use policies?
Yeah. And who's going to enforce that? Big question.
100%.
Yeah. Huge one. Number 8. Let's see, and we touched on this a little bit before. Cyber resilience matures into a C-level SLO, not even SLA there. I love it. Resilience moving to a top level executive metric. I think it's unavoidable, right? It has to be, and you hit earlier that AI has risen to become more of a concern or more of a priority. But I feel like if I go back and look at analyst surveys of what execs care about for the last 25 years, security, cybersecurity, however we've called it over time, it's always in the top 3. Frequently, it's the top 1, but it's never deviated or gone below that. It's all there, and it's still there. And now there's scariness with AI making it easier for folks to do things with security.
Yeah, I'm concerned because in the past we were protecting humans.
Sure.
And zero trust was the fact that, well, I wouldn't give anybody more access than they needed to do their job at an absolute minimum. The challenge now is I'm going to give agents access to data, and I'm going to give agents access to larger data sources than I would at one individual. And so do I actually trust that agent, A, will not get an infiltration and therefore get access to that data set, and B, that people who are not actually supposed to get to that asset will be able to get to that asset and use some sort of unharnessed inference request to get data out of that was never intended. Right? And so it's just another vector.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, like I said earlier, I mean, you've got more sophisticated attacks. And it's no longer at the point of, I got to train my people. Yeah, that's table stakes. But I'm telling you right now, AI will fool a large percentage of your employee base.
Yeah.
It's no longer the logo's off and there's off on a slant and the English isn't right and that's not the red of my bank. Or these are the first 4 numbers of your credit card, which are typically the same across all credit card users. They're getting really sophisticated.
Yeah.
They're using social engineering. They know that Rob lives here, and they know your wife's name, and they know potentially your kids' names, and they know what your hobbies are. And so it looks real. Right? I had one from a car rental company just two weeks ago, and they said I owed them money for a cracked windshield, and they had my rental number. They knew the city I rented from. They had the exact dates that I rented from.
Oh, so it was almost.
They knew the car that I had rented.
Oh, wow!
And it was only when I sent it up the chain, that our travel agency said, "Don't pay that. That's a scam." And I'm like, "That's a pretty darn good scam."
That's a good scam.
How did they have all that other information? I don't know, but the reality is, fooled me.
Yeah, and why it needs to be a C-level imperative, right?
It has to continue to be a C-level imperative.
Sorry, yes, and across the org. We reached the final one here, and I didn't include it in the look backs up front, but I know you always touch on something relative to workplace, workforce, leadership, managerial behaviors. And this one is talking about workforce splits by workforce leverage. Leaders become context multipliers, right? So the prediction in 2026, the best leaders will become context and productivity multipliers, getting more out of the team, getting more out of the people. Why?
Well, I think that there's this great concept in leadership that goes back probably 20 or 25 years that said, it's called management by walking around.
Love it.
You walk around, you look, you listen. But the reality is there's a lot going on right now. When we look at the people who've joined our organizations, whether they're veterans or rookies and they're coming into the company, they're looking for their leaders to actually understand how their job relates to the overall vision of the company, right? I think it was the janitor at NASA who told President Kennedy that his job was to put people on the moon. In today's world, it's actually easy for someone at a certain level of an organization to say, I'm not sure how my job actually matters. I just take out the trash, or I just administer the database, or I just rack the servers.
I just write code.
Right. Yeah. Or I just answer the phones.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders help connect the dots from highest level messaging down, but also productivity multipliers. They see what is actually working and what is actually driving value. And they amplify it. They bring it above the ground to say, hey, there's some really amazing things that other people are doing. And yes, I want to recognize them, but I want to encourage all of you to start doing the same.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, waiting for everybody to figure out how to be great at their job takes a hell of a lot longer than a leader actually looking at what great looks like across all their employees and picking out the individual pieces and saying, hey, here's some things for you to think about. Have you considered X? Have you considered Y? And essentially ultimately builds the productivity flow for everybody.
Taking what's good and scaling across. It's also philosophically how I've always liked to build teams, by selecting individuals that had differences, not similarities, right? Because the differences tend to balance each other out and then raise the tide for everybody on the team, right? If somebody's really strong in one area and the other's not, and they start working together, they both learn from one another. It's that same way. That's an easy way to do that multiplication, which is
Well said.
fun one, which I love to smile when that one happens. How do we sum this up? We covered a ton of areas, but relevant areas. And I think predictions that certainly within this year or coming soon, how would you sum it up? And maybe it's going back to our original quote, right, around the future. It's just not evenly distributed, and that gets you to finding and seeking sustainability, right, across a bunch of different areas.
So my advice for folks trying to navigate right now is try not to do too many things, right? I'm going to quote one of our executives who constantly says that, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. There's a lot being thrown at individuals today. We've got macro context, we've got corporate context, we've got infrastructure context, we've got AI hitting us at the same time. The reality is, it is our jobs to figure this out. We are at the beginning of an era on which our next generation will look at the decisions we made, and they will thank us for being responsible about the way we deployed these tools and integrated them into our business. Similar to where we are with e-commerce today, right? If we hadn't made some of these tough decisions to figure this stuff out
years ago,
we wouldn't be where we are.
Buying things on our phone.
Same thing with cloud.
Sure.
Right? We initially decided we put everything there, and then we're like, maybe this isn't such a good idea. Maybe I like the operating model, but I don't need to put it all in the cloud.
Yeah.
And so take a breath. Look around. Think about what problems you really want to solve and which problems will be most impactful when solved. And then build a minimally viable solution to solve one aspect of that problem. My advice as folks look at everything around there is, don't try to solve the whole thing day one. Try to solve a piece of it. Prove that it can be done. Decide whether or not your data is ready. Decide whether or not your governance and security models can keep up with it. And when new threats emerge, engage in the discussions with your executive team to say, what does this really mean to us? Is this an opportunity for revenue? Is this an opportunity to save cost? Is this actually a risk to us in terms of our posture?
Yeah, the big three.
And therefore, how should we react, right? And I always like to lean back, Rob, on the Eisenhower model of important and urgent, right? I mean, people used to ask Dwight Eisenhower how he kept his priorities straight, and he said, look, it's very simple. There's urgent and important. And if it's urgent and important, it gets my number one focus.
Yeah.
Everything else, especially stuff that's not urgent and not important, falls second.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on, and it's perfectly normal to feel overwhelmed with everything that's coming at us every day. But the reality is, it is our job to navigate through this, and we can do so by being as educated, as informed, and as calm as we can as we approach each of these opportunities.
Yeah. And read more and think more. Taking it back to the top.
I think think
where
more,
we started out.
Think more is a big one because, I don't know, some people take really long showers and they spend their time thinking. Yeah. Other people spend their time thinking in planes. But I'll get back to where we started. We don't think enough. I think it was actually Thomas J. Watson who came up with the think that went on people's desks back at IBM.
I got to sign it home, shout out to my parents who are, I'm sure, watching this, And
it was amazing that even in the 50s, that the CEO's main ask to his whole organization was stop running around, take a moment to think.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, with smartphones and social apps and everything else, we don't have a lot of that time.
Yeah.
So whatever it takes, those 3 minutes of thinking time, build them into your day. Because ultimately what it will do is it will guide you, and it will help you understand whether or not you're headed in the right direction, whether or not there are things you should change or be concerned about. And my favorite part, Rob, it's also your body's time to tell you how it's feeling.
Yeah.
Because it finally has a minute to say, hey, sir, if you could spare a moment, I have something I'd like to share with you.
Yeah. And by the way, why don't you go take a walk while you're doing that? Because that's good for you as well.
100%.
Right? Which I try to do every day. Hey, loved it. Thanks for navigating through all these. Thanks for being so thoughtful and, writing all these things down. It is fun to look back at them, but also just to hear what's going on in your mind. I always get excited about that. For everybody else, check out blog.purestorage.com, where you can find more details around what we discussed today in text form, and certainly go to our YouTube channel for Pure Storage and check out Sean's I'm still going to call it new show, Beyond the IT Headlines, which is picking up in speed, and love that we have another podcast program in the Pure Storage family. So great work getting that out.
Yeah, and if you've got folks listening in that would love to be part of the show that have some particular point of view, once again, it's not an advertising platform. We're not looking for sales pitches, but if there is a particular area of expertise and you want us to dig deeper, or even some of your listeners that want us to dive into a particular area that they're struggling with, we'd absolutely love to take that forward and, bring our provocative point of view to the forefront.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. That's what we try to do here. So thank you, Sean. As always, thanks for making time for this. I know you're super busy. Thank you out there for checking out this episode of the Pure Report podcast. Tell a friend, tell a colleague, as always, and we will keep the great guests coming onto the program, like my good buddy Sean Rosemarin, who has always been a good fan and always provided great feedback. I thank you for that.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll wrap for Pure Storage. Sean Rosemarin, this is Rob Ludeman saying, don't look back. Something might be gaining on you.